Coming up on today's show.
A lot of things that people show me and say, this is really something that still has use in it. I can still use it for something, but you can't use it for its original intended use.
Just from the recycling aspect of it, all that stuff doesn't end up in a landfill. I mean, it's a great reuse ecologically as well.
So maybe it's sentimental, but it's not really useful, and for whatever reason the client doesn't have space, needs to downsize, whatever. They're trying to lighten their load.
Creative reuse in organizing, today on Keeping You Organized. Well, hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we're going to get a little creative. No, we're not going to put on the aprons and get the paint out and do figure painting and stuff like that, although that does sound a lot of fun. We're going to talk about how we can get organized, which is really the theme of this show, but do some creative things while we're going through the process. And we're going to bring on Gail Goddard from ClutterFairyHouston.com. And Gail, welcome to Keeping You Organized.
Hi, thanks John. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on. This is your first podcast with us. I know you're down from the Houston area, so you know our great friend Ellen DeLapp down there. And
yes, I've known Ellen for a long time now. We're good friends.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to talk today. This is a great topic, I think, because a lot of people struggle when they deal with clutter and getting organized about letting things go. And a lot of times in some of our other podcasts, we've heard that, well, if they know there's a good use for it somewhere else, it's maybe a little easier to let go. Is that something that you find as well?
Exactly. That's exactly true. And a lot of things that people show me and say, this is really something that still has use in it. I can still use it for something, but you can't use it for its original intended use. It's a leftover container. It's a piece of magazine. It's a piece of ribbon that's not big enough to wrap around a gift. That kind of stuff is exactly the kinds of things that can be shunted off to a creative reuse resale store that would intersect with artists, and an artist would come and collect the object to use in art. And so it becomes sort of a secondary life for things that can't be used for their original intent.
Okay, let's talk about, because I know this is a new budding hot industry called the Creative Reuse Centers. And why don't you tell us about what they are and maybe how you got involved with them as a professional organizer?
Well, there is actually a creative reuse resale store in Houston called the Texas Art Asylum. And I intersected with the owner of that store very early in my business, the first year. She was lecturing at a event that I went to listen, and she started talking about the kinds of things that she was collecting and what she was doing and who she was selling to, and I immediately, the light bulb went off. I'm like, oh my God, I could donate so much stuff to her. And I ran up to her after her speech and said, we have to talk, girl, because I have some stuff for you. Right. And it started a relationship between her and the NAPO Houston chapter here. There's a whole lot of organizers that donate stuff to her now, and part of what she does is she has a big space, a commercial space, and she collects all this stuff. She makes it available for resale to artists, and she also has a separate teacher sale room. So once a month they do a nonprofit sale for teachers in the area to come with their teacher badge, and they can get supplies that are usable in a classroom for a really low price, like $5 a grocery bag. Oh. And so I have tons of stuff that come out of my clients that, here's some leftover notebook paper, here's a binder, here's a piece of ribbon, here's some wrapping paper, and all of that stuff can go into one of the two legs of her store. And amazingly, it all goes back out again. We bring stuff and it all floats away. Somebody takes it away to use it for something. So it's an amazing way for us to say to our clients, oh, you can't use those, that half of a ring binder, but I can take that to Texas Art Asylum and somebody can collect it there. So yeah. It's a great way to assure the client that it's not being wasted. The remaining use can be used, even if it's not actually going to be used for what it started out for.
Right. It's that old phrase, one man's trash, another's treasure. But I think, how many, I know this from up at our lake home, we've got, I don't know, probably 10 different half full spiral notebooks. You know,
Right?
so you use about half of it, and then okay, I'm done using that. That class is over, or whatever. Then it just goes up there, and we use it for playing games and stuff. But I can imagine even a half-used spiral notebook could really help a student somewhere.
Think about a teacher that has a budget, an annual budget of $10 a year.
Oh,
Those are the teachers that come to the art asylum to get supplies for $5 a bag because they have no resources and they're spending their own money. It's common knowledge now that teachers all across this country are spending their own money to fund their classrooms and support their students who also may not have the resources to get the supplies that they need. And so what to you is a half-used binder full of paper is going to be the difference between they can have paper or they don't have paper in the classroom. So
right.
it's a great way to take what is in our abundance is no longer worth keeping up with in the house because it's too much to manage, or we don't want to store 25 half empty binders, ring binders of paper, but I can take all those away in one trip and it'll go off into that warehouse and some student will end up with it before the school year's over.
Right, and it seems like just from the recycling aspect of it, all that stuff doesn't end up in a landfill. I mean, it's a great reuse ecologically as well. So
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit just about the economics of how that works. So the clients donated. Is it do they get a tax deduction, or is it just a straight donation, and then whatever funds the art center or the reuse center has kind of helps support, pay their rent and that kind of thing?
Right. So all of the places around the country do it slightly differently, but the one in Houston has the teacher sale part is a nonprofit section, and so if they donate things that go into the teacher's room, then they get a nonprofit they get a certificate for it so they can write it off on their taxes. If they donate it into the art side, where that's actually a for-profit business, and so they're selling the stuff that gets donated. They're selling it to artists, and that keeps the door open and keeps employees there and keeps the lights on basically.
Great.
And so in our location it depends. Now around the country, some of them are totally nonprofit and some of them are for sale entities, and it's really just a matter of who started it and how they're running their business model. But
right.
Ultimately it's a way for you to make the stuff go away.
Yes.
And if your store is a nonprofit, then you get a certificate, and if it isn't, you won't.
Right.
But either way, the stuff's going out of your office or couch floor, right, or wherever it is, right?
Right. Well, this is a great concept, and it all really begins with the person who's willing to give it up. And we kind of alluded to that at the beginning of the show. We're going to take a quick break now, and when we come back, I want to address that idea of what if someone's having a hard time letting it go, and how this whole process will assist them. So we are talking about the creative reuse in organization with Gail Goddard, and we will be right back. Get organized in color at myorganized.life.
Live, we laugh, we love, and color. Live, we laugh, we love, and color. Live, we laugh, we love, and color.
myorganized.life. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about creative reuse in organizing, taking things that you may think, oh, what can be done with this? I need to get rid of this, and donating them to these creative reuse centers around the country, where then artists or teachers can take these things and reuse them. It's a great concept, and we've got Gail Goddard from clutterfairyhouston.com on with us. And Gail, so before the break, we talked about these centers and what they are, but let's get back into the trenches. You're on the front line with the client. I'm sure some people, hey, this concept is really great. I totally see it. They're more artistic, right? But there's probably
right.
some that are saying, why would anybody want this bottle cap, right? And
right.
So let's go through the mind game of how does this work when you're on the front lines with a client?
So how that affects my clients is as a creative person, if my client is a really creative person, They see all the possibilities of all things. When they pick up something, they can look at it and their brain starts to churn, and they can come up with 37 ways that it might be useful to somebody else. So my client struggle is the creative person has a hard time letting it go because they keep coming up with other ideas about how it can be used. And the non-creative client usually has a little bit more time, easier time getting rid of things. They're attached sentimentally and they're struggling with it from a sentimental point of view.
Yeah. We hear a lot about that sentimental piece. So how do you describe to a client who's maybe sentimental with something the benefits of doing this?
If they can agree to let it go, then it is going to go and be used by someone else who is going to find it as valuable and important to them as it is to the client right now. So maybe it's sentimental, but it's not really useful, and for whatever reason the client doesn't have space, needs to downsize, whatever. They're trying to lighten their load. If I can describe to them that on the other end, here is a center where people absolutely come to pick your item up and take it home and use it for something else, that it gives them the sense that it's going to have a life after them. It's going to go on and be useful and be appreciated by somebody else. And a lot of times that's enough for people to let it go into the world and not be stuck in their house anymore.
Yeah.
And truthfully, someone else will appreciate it if I can just get it over there, right?
Right. Well, okay, now, so here's what's going through my mind right now. I'm thinking you're in there. There's probably tons of stuff that people need to get rid of. How do you decide what can be donated and maybe this needs to either be thrown or given to the Goodwill or wherever, it's not going to work for an artist? How do you make that evaluation?
Well, so the first thing is if you have a center in your area, you should go and check their website because they're going to have a list to tell you what they don't take. The one in Houston has a really short list that says we don't take children, we don't take books, we don't take clothing. And so it's a really short list of, we're not in the business of dealing with somebody's clothes or household goods. Like, we're not going to take your appliances from the kitchen. We don't need kitchenware. We don't need clothing. We want paper and craft supplies and office supplies and containers. And so the list of things that they want is much, much longer, but there's some very specific things like Goodwill is going to be the people that you want to shunt clothing off to, because a creative use place isn't going to be using that. But raw fabric, yarn, that kind of stuff, that's going to go to the creative use center. If it's not made into clothes already, if it's just some fabric, they're going to want it. So anything that is you would generally think to take to Goodwill already, you probably should. Here's clothes, here's leftover books to take to the library, here's the kitchen gear that I don't want anymore that's extra. But anything else potentially could go there. And you can donate it in a series, right? Like you can take stuff to the resale store and see if there's anything that they reject, if they don't want it. And then if they don't want it, then it can go to Goodwill.
Right. How about things like, broken bicycles? Because, I'm thinking in my art, I see these, this bicycle art, or you got a bike frame or maybe some bigger, pieces of metal. I can't think of other things right off the top of my head, but like larger metal working kinds of things. You see sculptures made out of stuff like this all the time.
Absolutely.
They take stuff like
and that is exactly the kind of thing that they would flip out about.
Okay.
Like I take rusty pieces of hardware, I take rusty pieces of metal over there because that makes them happy. I take broken pieces of keyboards from computers and the guts of a computer because they use those pieces in artwork. And so a bicycle that's in parts, do they want 1,500 of them? No. But do they want your one? Probably. And I would just, for something that's large, I would just call them first and make sure that they're equipped to handle something large. As long as their space can handle it, they're probably going to want it.
Yeah. I know when we were clearing out my mother-in-law's place, we would take a few pictures of things and like send them the picture. And they say, okay, yeah, that would be good. That, that wouldn't. And, what is some of the most creative things that you've seen reused in just your dealings there in the Houston area?
Well, we did a project with the NAPO Houston group one time. We did a field trip out there to see what it was like, and so she used us to sort on our field trip. So she pulled all of this paperwork out for us to sort through, and it was little scraps of paper with handwriting on it and old ads and pieces of, here's a receipt from the hardware store from 1955 and things like that. And as we were looking through and sorting this stuff, she was super excited about this collection of ephemera that would be used in artwork. And a lot of the organizers were like, I would have just thrown this stuff away. Like, no, because an artist is going to see this old advertising or this personal handwriting or this old cutout from a magazine that is clearly dated and not 2018. And they're going to find that fascinating and appreciate it and want to incorporate it into old photographs, for instance, old black and white photographs and old family shots and old vacation photos, and that kind of stuff will end up in a piece of art. And so the craziest thing, one time a friend of mine was driving down the road and she saw an old hobby horse that was missing a part on the side of the road, and she passed it and she thought, no, Ramona's gonna want that. And so she backed up and she took a picture of it and texted Ramona, and Ramona was like, send it to me, I'd love to have it. And so you never know, but it was literally trash on the side of the road, and my friend picked it up and took it to Texas Art Asylum.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we're just about out of time. Before we go, I think people might need some help with this. Is this the kind of thing you help with? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your business, if you're just locally based or if you do virtual, and how people can get a hold of you?
Okay. I do residential and small business work in Houston and have been doing that for 11 years now. I do some virtual work if you'd like, and I also have a YouTube channel with about 90 videos on it. So there's tons of virtual support you can get if you'd like. And otherwise, you can call me in Houston and schedule an appointment with me. I'd love to come and work with you.
And the website is
clutterfairyhouston.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to make sure you get that in there. I know we can see the Clutter Fairy up there, but we don't want them to go to theclutterfairy.com. We want to go to clutterfairyhouston.com. Well, this has been a great and enlightening show. I think this is going to motivate a lot of people, and even some of our professional organizers who watch too. If you haven't thought about this idea of creative reuse, check into it, and we'll have links to Gail's website, so you can maybe go check that out or network with her. So if you're an organizer, that would be a great thing as well. And folks, I think there we have it. Gail, good job on your first podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Good. Well, that's it, folks. Now you can get your mind going. You can be creative. Get rid of some of that stuff, but make sure it's creatively reused, and then come back next time on Keeping You Organized.